Yes, that's on. I wish I had graduated from CGIU. It is great to see all of you guys. Thank you so much for coming. I want to introduce our fabulous and distinguished panel. First up, we have Jeanette Richardson-Baars, who is director of the Aruba Police Academy and the national coordinator for anti-human trafficking and smuggling. In 2012, Jeanette received the Hero Acting to End Modern-Day Slavery from someone named Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. You may have heard of her. Our next guest is Dan Viederman, who is the executive director of Verite. And in his role, Dan works very closely with NGOs and companies to improve working conditions across the globe. And our third panelist just graced the stage and absolutely killed it in the way that only she can. The lovely, incredible powerhouse, Jada Pinkett-Smith, actor, activist, and mother, and founder of Don't Sell Bodies. So thank you guys all for sharing this time with us. There's a lot to discuss on this topic. It is a really under-discussed topic, and I think a lot of times, and we will certainly talk about the global implications of modern-day slavery and sex trafficking. I think something that is sort of under-discussed is the impact in the United States. I think this is staggering to me. 45 to 50,000 women and children are trafficked into the United States every year. Between 2008 and 2010, 83% of the victims in confirmed sex trafficking cases were American citizens. So this is both abroad and right here at home. My first question, I want to go to Dan. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of modern-day slavery, because there really isn't another word for that. I mean, President Obama spoke at CGI last year, and he said, I understand the connotations of the word slavery and how deeply that cuts to the core of the American psyche in terms of our history, our shared history. But there is no other word for what is happening to these people. And Dan, in your work in terms of the supply chain, I wonder if you could sort of tell us how modern slavery is a part of business these days. I think, Dan, there's a power button on the left-hand side.
Good? Great. Hello. My apologies for my technological inadequacy. The phrase modern-day slavery distinguishes what's happening now from slavery by making us aware that it's basically still happening and never went away, right? So the manifestations of slavery are not dramatically different now than they were in the far distant past. The one thing that is perhaps more present now is the problem that results when people cross borders to get a job. So the things that you are currently using to take pictures of us, like your smartphones, the food that you had for lunch, all of these are produced by, generally, people who have sought out a job by crossing a border. And in order to get this job that is very important for them, they have often paid thousands of dollars to a labor recruiter. So Guatemalans have paid $6,000 to come into the United States and get a job in a tree nursery. Or Filipinos pay $10,000 to get a job in an electronics factory in Malaysia. These people end up in what we know as debt bondage. It used to be called, back in the founding days of the United States, indentured servitude. And it's not really very different. Someone who cannot leave their work because they owe too much money to the person who employs them. This is true in whether you're talking about sex trafficking or whether you're talking about work and supply chains. But it's very important at the outset to realize that most of what is made or produced in the world right now has the potential to have slavery embedded in it.
That's something I don't think, I mean, we talk a lot about sort of carbon footprints and the implications of the things we buy and eat and the choices we make, but the fact that slavery may be woven in to the production, I think, is something that we obviously need to be not only cognizant of, but do something about. And I want to get back to you in a second on sort of what we can do as consumers and activists and advocates to change that. But first I want to go to Jada to talk more specifically about the sex trafficking piece, and the power button is on the left-hand side. This is going to be the big takeaway from, no, it's not. The big takeaway is going to be something way more important, but are we on? There we go.
Yep.
So Jada, sex trafficking is a huge part of modern day slavery, and you have started an organization called Don't Sell Bodies. And I wonder if you can just give us a sense of how you got started and what your organization is doing.
Well, believe it or not, my 11-year-old daughter, Willow, came to me. She saw the Coney 2012 video, and she started doing some research of her own on the internet, and she came to me and she said, Mommy, there are children in this country that are being sold for sex that are my age. Now, in my ignorance, I said, that's impossible. That doesn't happen here in the United States. And I went to the internet and I did some research of my own because she said to me, Mommy, I have to lend my voice to speak for girls who are being, exploited in this way. And so I started to do research and I realized, whoa, this is a heavy subject. And so we decided to team up as mother and daughter and fight this issue. And as I was doing my research, I saw that there wasn't one site that you could go to get as much information as you wanted. I wanted to create a site where you could find out about all the wonderful NGOs and the work that they're doing and get information about this subject internationally as well as nationally. And so that's why we developed Don't Sell Bodies.
Jeanette, I want to go to you as someone who's actually involved in law enforcement and is dealing with this idea of human trafficking and modern-day slavery and indentured servitude on a real practical level. And you are in Aruba, which is a relatively small place, 300 square kilometers, I think, if I'm correct. But it's a concern, and you've taken up a really laudable grassroots effort to combat it. But the reality of what is sort of happening is different than your expectations were going into this. Can you just sort of give us a view from the perspective of someone who's combating it, on a day-to-day level?
Well, thank you for having me here in the first place. I don't know if everybody knows where Aruba is. It's on top of Venezuela, like the little speck dot, very small. I think since Natalie Holloway disappeared, more people know where Aruba is. But that's where I'm from. It's very small. It has its challenges based on that. But talking about theory and reality. When we started in 2007, like Jada also said, you expect the victims to be more in the sexual part of the human trafficking, the prostitutes and everything. So that we prepared for that. We had oral agreements with a shelter. We had people standing by to give them support to make sure they could eat, that they could work, that, had everything prepared. But you as students, I think, should know that, once you prepare for an exam, there's always this little part that you kind of hope they don't ask questions about. You know that feeling? Well, that is what we went through, because the first case ever that we got on human trafficking, you catch it, right? It was no victim of sexual slavery. It was a guy. He was working as a tailor, and it was 2 days before Christmas. You can imagine that? So we had no shelter, no assistance, nothing prepared 2 days before Christmas. So, and then you start to think outside of the box. And that is something I want to give you all, is think about what you can do. Never think about what you can't, because there's a million things that you can't do. You have to concentrate on what you can. So eventually we got him shelter at the Red Cross. It was for 3 days, just to pass Christmas, right? And he stayed there for 3 months. So in that sense, you can prepare everything. You can think on anything, but reality is different than what you thought of.
Some part of this is about changing not only cultural norms in terms of how we see both women who are forced to sell their bodies, how we sort of bring them back into society, judgments we make about who is and who isn't a modern-day slave, but it's also about choices we make as consumers too, because I think a huge part of this is that business is being built upon a supply chain that's inherently flawed. And Dan, if you could give us a sense of sort of what power the consumer has, what power we have as purchasers of iPhones and iPads and other devices that are not made by Apple, but products that where the supply chain is one that, you know, is valueless insofar as people are indentured and the standard of labor is not fair.
So companies listen to people who buy their products. They do. That's why we have organic. It's frankly why we have fair trade. It's why we have a whole range of natural labels and anything else. And you'll notice that there's a lot of labels on the green side, right? Companies are falling all over themselves to tell you that they're greener than someone else or they're green enough. I would be hard pressed, or I would challenge you to think of the last time a company advertised itself to you that it had fair labor practices, or it had no slavery in its supply chain. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of which is it's hard to prove, but let's leave that aside for the second. The most important is that you haven't actually spoken. We haven't spoken in a way that tells the companies we buy stuff from that we want them to prove to us that they've made things with fair labor. So it's been that conversation between companies and the public has kind of been a few activists or maybe trade unions, and the companies kind of put it aside and say, I'm not really finding any value in trying to prove to the world that I am using good labor practices or don't have slaves in my supply chain. So there's a huge opportunity. There's a huge opportunity for you to start raising your voices around these issues. All it will take is everybody in this room. The next time you go and shop at the one of the brands that you like, it doesn't have to be comprehensive, it doesn't have to be across the board, but one of the brands you like, to ask them what they've done to prove to you that they have good labor practices in their supply chain. Go to their website, see if they say something about it. Because the first step in achieving change, the first step in any recovery program is admitting you have a problem, and companies don't even want to admit that they have a problem. So tell them that they have a problem and then ask them what they're doing about it. We don't have to think about boycotting. We have to think about a positive value proposition, as the lunchtime speaker said. Give them a reason to sell to you because you care about labor conditions. That's you as a consumer, right? Frankly, those of you who are inside universities and other large institutions, those of you who will someday run a business, you're also buying things, and you tend to be buying things at a bigger scale. So why not make sure that your institution, your university, or the businesses that you run or family members run also require those who sell to you to prove to you that they have good working conditions. There isn't a single label right now. It's really a little bit too complicated for that. But if you want to know what's going on, so if you want to know what's going on, you're going to have to ask. I will mention one way in which you can ask. California has once again done us all a favor and led the way by passing something called the California Transparency in Supply Chains Act. Excellent.
California!
A whoop for the SB 657. Anyway, what it does is basically require every company operating in California, which is 3,200 companies in the world, to disclose what they've done on supply chain forced labor. And there are some out there that have done a really nice job of disclosing, like, say, Patagonia, and then there are others, like a juice box maker who shall remain nameless for the moment, but you easily have to find, who have basically responded to the California Act by saying, hey, we have nothing going on, we don't know. They've thumbed their nose at this disclosure requirement. So look up the companies you care about, what their disclosure is against the California Supply Chains and Transparency Act.
Can I just ask, how did that California sort of standards come, how did those standards arise? I mean, I'm assuming that was driven by activists in California.
It was, including the actress Julia Ormond, who, with her organization Asset, and a number of the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, the Polaris Project, an organization called Not for Sale, I think. So a whole coalition of NGOs that are interested in eliminating slavery got together and essentially pushed this through with the help of some state senators in California, and then Governor Schwarzenegger signed it a few years ago.
So impressive, and also, change is possible. Jada, we talk about shifting consumer behaviors. There's also shifting cultural norms, right? This statistic, and Jada and I got a chance to talk on my show on Thursday, but we didn't get to talk about the fact that the Super Bowl is the #1 incident for human trafficking in the U.S., which is shocking and terrifying. And let's talk about what the implications of that, because I think frequently we talk about this as a conversation about women and girls by women and girls, but actually it really involves men in a big, big, big way. And I think part of this is getting this information out to everybody and getting everybody engaged on it, men, women, and children.
I think it illuminates the necessity to change social attitudes towards women, because the idea that there's a high level of trafficking during sporting events just illuminates the idea of the objectification of woman. And so the idea that, and there's this really interesting documentary, if you get a chance, it's called Rape for Profit. And these 3 young men from Seattle did this documentary based and focused on Johns and their mentality, and how there tends to be a separation between a woman that you can buy for sex as literally an object versus a sister, a mother, a daughter. And so I think that we really have to examine these attitudes and figure out how these attitudes are developed and change them. Because ultimately, my belief is if we don't change the attitude, you will never, ever, ever put a dent in trafficking. If we cannot put a dent in the idea of objectifying women in that way. But that's, you'll see that all over the world. It's not just, our sporting events here, but also the Olympics. I could give you this, it's soccer games, because it's part of entertainment. It's part of entertainment.
And the idea that this isn't happening in some sort of shrouded secret society, but these are around days and moments of national gathering, that this kind of behavior is not only okay, but accepted.
It's accepted. It's accepted, and that's what I'm saying. And I mean, it's deeply embedded in our cultures that this is something that's okay. And even with the statistics, you have to be careful with the statistics. I tell people this all the time. This is a very insidious crime. It's so hidden. So the stats that we get are stats of people that we actually know about, but there are thousands of people that are enslaved and in places that are in our neighborhoods, right underneath our noses, that are being trafficked, that are not part of those statistics. So I'm always careful with the numbers that we're given. I always double it, maybe even triple it, because very rarely will victims come forward, because yet again, the shame that we put on these women and these girls and these little boys and these men, it's not just women. It's not just women. We're getting more and more cases of young boys, more and more cases of transgender, transsexual individuals as well. We have to be very careful with that. And we're having a big problem here in the United States because our shelters are literally only for women. And now we're having more cases. So, this is becoming a very big problem that we have to look at much more broadly.
And to that point, Jeanette, we talk about, when we're talking about sexual trafficking, we're thinking about prostitutes, sex slaves, but also, there are manual laborers, day laborers, domestic workers. I mean, if you could tell us about your experience on that level, folks that are working inside your household, or not my household, or hopefully not your household, but that are part of normal, quote-unquote, everyday society, but are indentured servants, effectively.
Yes, that's true, and that's why I support you. It's true, we had our first victim was a male, and we didn't have nothing arranged for him, so that is really a big problem worldwide, because wherever you go, everything is arranged for women and none is done for males. Talking about domestic servitude, this is a part of helping people to be aware of what goes around in their own family structure, in their local structure, because in Aruba we have something that's called a cria. I think maybe the people from the Caribbean knows what they are. They are domestic workers, servants that come into the household because almost everybody in Aruba works. So the mother is not at home. The cria will take care of the children, the cooking, the cleaning, the transport, everything for a couple of years. Nothing wrong with that. It's part of our culture that is being done, and it's being done in the Caribbean all over. The problem is that this person is dependent on her boss, because that person will take care of her tickets flying into the country, making sure that she has somewhere to live, that she is fed, that she has some money to live on, etc., etc. Essentially, you're talking about debt bondage, one of the forms of human trafficking. I'm not saying in every case it's like that, but there is a risk, there's a chance. It could be a form of human trafficking. There was a case in St. Martin, which is one of the other islands of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, a couple of years back. And an Indian family was convicted of human trafficking because of their domestic servant, a lady, was essentially held as a slave. And she had no freedom. Her passport was taken. She couldn't go anywhere. She had hours from, well, probably 14, 18 hours a day, didn't get no sleep, was abused physically, emotionally. That is human trafficking. One of the things that we try to do is take these cultural determined concepts and try to explain to people and say, like, I'm not saying it's all human trafficking, but there is a risk. Open your eyes, investigate. Maybe it's the lady living next door to you. How come you never see her outside? How come you never see anybody visiting her? How come she's always busy with something? It could be an indication that something is wrong. And that's why we try to teach people and see, like, look at things around you. You might not think it's human trafficking, but it might be.
I mean, that would seem to be a huge piece of this, is that victims don't often know that they're victims. And then sort of once they figure out, oh, I can't leave. I mean, I can't get out of this. I am effectively an indentured servant, or I'm involved in some form of slave labor here. What resources exist, Dan, to pull people out of this? I mean, and specifically, I guess, in the business community, I mean, how do you change patterns like that? How do companies exert pressure? How do you get workers out of these bad situations?
I mean, the good news is it can be done if a company decides it's important enough to do. So we've demonstrated with Apple, one of everyone's favorite companies, that the labor migrants who were assembling Apple devices in Malaysian factories, who had been paying a lot of money to get these jobs, Apple classified this as forced labor. So to their credit, they took aim at this problem and said it needs to be solved. And then together we went in and figured out how much each worker had paid, and Apple forced their employers, not the company itself, but their employers, to reimburse money to those workers. So that's reimbursed so far over the last 3 years or so, a total of about $10 million being paid back to people who were severely disadvantaged. Good.
Which is actually, I mean, very unsung as far as a really positive development.
It's a positive development. They have not, I've told them they should make more noise about it because it's really good. But they're the only company that can denominate their work on this issue in terms of the amount of money reimbursed to workers who've been cheated out of their money. There's one company. So we've demonstrated it can be possible. And what we need to do now is create more of a reason why companies should do this. And I think, like I said before, this sort of the enforcing the disclosure that is currently required is a piece of it. Luckily, President Obama last year signed the executive order for federal procurement, requiring that any company that is selling to the federal government, which is the largest buyer of goods and services in the world, has to demonstrate that it doesn't have this kind of debt bondage in its supply chain. So again, demonstrated that it's possible. Companies can also create partnerships with NGOs, be they NGOs in Malaysia or NGOs in California or NGOs in Aruba, to find resources for workers directly, or at least give workers the access to resources. And one of the ways in which that's being done is sort of hotlines or grievance processes where workers can text or phone in to a hotline number in case they feel that they're in trouble. Again, it's possible. What we need now is to figure out how to scale it.
That's a good follow or tee up to the question I have for Jada. You know, it's empowering victims to come out of the shadows and also giving them the resources to do so. And Polaris Project has a text message campaign where if you are a victim of trafficking, you can sort of text for help. You're working on the Be Safe app. If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so the Be Safe app is an app that we just invested in, and is an app that you can actually download on your phone, where this app we're hoping will eventually become the new 911, so that you could literally press a button and immediately it will call an emergency contact that you have on your phone. So let's say you put your mother or your father, and immediately the number will come out, and online it will start streaming what is actually happening at that particular moment online. And we have many, many, many other features that go with this as well. They're maps of safety that you can pull up on this Be Safe app. But we're hoping that it will eventually become the new 911. And it immediately not only contacts your emergency contact, but the police. And so,
amazing.
It's pretty amazing. I'm pretty happy about it. So slowly but surely, every month we're adding new technology to this particular app.
And then, I mean, even independent of the sort of the cutting, bleeding edges of the 21st century, Jeanette, there's also things that the community can do, right? One of the things that I read when I was reading about sexual human trafficking is the importance of doctors. And doctors being sort of first responders. They're the ones that, they see women or men come in and they can see, wait, something's not right here. Physically you're showing the signs of this. And they can almost effectively be the first people to pull victims out from very, very bad situations. The question is, how can we better equip doctors and community members to understand the signs of being a victim of human trafficking?
Well, actually it comes down to one word, which is awareness. Awareness training, informing people about what are the signs of human trafficking. We in Aruba use the card that ICE made, with the 10 most common signs of human trafficking. I don't know if you know about it. If you don't, go online, find it, because it's very good. If we talk about doctors or lawyers or people that work into the government, because if the people come into Aruba, they have to pass through certain stages, to get a permit, to get everything. So what we try to do is educate these people and say, listen, these are the 10 most common signs of human trafficking. If you meet somebody that you think might be in this situation that will need help, just give them the phone number from the hotline. Or the email address. They can call us, they can email us. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call or text or email, and we will make sure that help gets to you. And that will give those professionals, the opportunity without any kind of fear or threat, or, they don't want to do it because they don't know what are the consequences later. They will be able to give us a heads up, give us a tip, just a little information, and we will research that case and see if, by any chance, that person is a possible victim of human trafficking or is in any kind of other problem, maybe physical abuse by a spouse or a boyfriend or whoever, and we will get them to the help that they need. So it's kind of like supporting those professionals, informing them, and supporting them whenever there is some indication of human trafficking. And it works perfectly, actually. The most tips that I get as national coordinator comes from professionals and other departments that they say, hey, there's something wrong. Maybe I can't put my finger on it, but it's something that this person is generating in energy maybe, or the signs or the words that they're using, there is something wrong, whether it be human trafficking or something else. It doesn't really matter. You can contact us and we will make sure that help will be given to that person.
Dan, we're going to open this up to Q&A in a second, but before we do, we were walking over here. We were talking about human trafficking and forced labor sort of maybe being the next wave. We think about so many other things as it regards society and consumerism, whether that's the environmental impact, but this is a human rights question. And tell me a little bit about how and why you think that this is gaining momentum.
I think this is gaining momentum for a number of reasons. We do have a new regulatory framework. So we have the California Act. No whoop this time. We have the executive order that Obama signed. So we have a couple of laws that are saying to business, do something on this issue, right? But I think more importantly, or as importantly, this is something that no business wants to be associated with, right? The multinationals that we deal with, the local businesses, no one has created a business model that is relying on the severe exploitation of slaves. It's just not true. These multinationals are not intending to exploit people. It happens as a natural part of their business, but they're not intending to exploit people. And I think this regulatory framework on the one hand, and then the absolute sheer awfulness of the issue on the other, has the potential right now to come together to get companies to take steps. together that can both protect their reputations and also achieve real impact in a way that some of the other issues that we've seen come up and down over the years, health and safety and wages, which are a little more controversial, have not really come together. But I think the one piece that's really missing is for a bunch of consumers to say, this matters to me. And that's an opportunity for all of us, frankly. And I would hope that some of the advice that I've given, you could go back and take some time and start researching the brands that you really care about and tell them that you care about them and tell them that if they do something on this issue, you will be more loyal to them and you promise to buy their goods and products forever.
Jada, the idea of we see you, both we see you who do not practice fair labor standards and we see you, the victims of it, is hugely important. And just before we go to the audience Q&A, having cultural spokespeople, powerhouses like yourself involved on this, I think is hugely important in terms of shedding daylight on the issue. And also showing everybody in this country around the world that it's a really important issue. I mean, this is a subject for global attention. Do you feel like there is momentum among your fellow cultural powerhouses to take this up with gusto?
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge alliance of us that have taken this issue on, and in different ways as well. Demi Moore has taken it on. She attacks it through technology. She was one of the first women that I actually connected when I became aware of this particular issue. We have Mira Sorvino, also, who I'm actually going to be meeting with when I go back to Los Angeles. We have Selma Hayek, who has been a huge advocate for domestic violence for a very long time, which this is also connected to in many ways. But yeah, I would say that there's a lot more awareness amongst us, and we are definitely in communication and trying to lock up and flow power to one another to do as much as we can to bring awareness to this issue. Is very important.
That's not a bad group of women to get engaged on the issue. All right, I want to open it up to some audience Q&A. So if you can raise your hand, we'll get someone with a mic over. Just introduce yourself and let us know who the question is for. So why don't we start right here in the front?
My question about the application that you've been mentioning, what if it does people abuse it or it becomes an invasion of privacy? What then?
As far as
what you were saying earlier about that, like the idea you were mentioning about a replacement for the 911.
That particular app.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
As far as abuse
of discretion, like when people abuse it, or even a possible invasion of privacy.
Yeah, let's hope that it doesn't. It's not abused and not used for an invasion of privacy, but that it's. We all have to be responsible. We all have to be responsible for tools that we're given for a particular reason. So you just hope that people will use it responsibly.
I know, but what if, are there any things in place to make sure that does not happen?
As far as invading one's privacy?
As far as that possibility of an invasion of privacy or an abuse.
Well, we hope that with your phone, if you have a code on your phone, that you would be the only one that would be able to access it. But yeah, I'm sure there are all kinds of technical things to make sure that your privacy is kept, for sure. Yes, thank you.
All right, next question. How about way in the back over there? Last table in the row, just to make our poor mic handler log in some miles.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I'm from Oberlin College, and I was just wondering what the actual definition of a traffic victim is, because I know there's a lot of discussion of sex workers' rights, and to make sure that you're not infringing upon their rights as well.
Jeanette, do you want to take that? The actual definition of trafficking, the sexual trafficking as opposed to sex workers.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I couldn't really hear your question. Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. The definition for a sexual trafficking victim, that was your question, right? Okay, actually it's just that it doesn't matter whether it's for sex or for labor or for organs, which also falls under the definition.
The definition of a victim is somebody that under certain circumstances reaches somewhere, and it could be a promise of a job, or something that somebody is kidnapped or forced or paid for, or you have all these circumstances in the definition, the official definition. But the moment that person reaches there, they get themselves in a situation that they cannot get out of, and that is the situation of abuse of power, abuse of physical abuse, emotional abuse. What happens is, let me give you an example, maybe that's easier. If we're talking about sex workers, you can come to Aruba to work for 3 months, what we call as an adult entertainer. We were kind of like hypocritical, we don't call them prostitutes. They're adult entertainers, but it's kind of like the same. So what happens is that person knows that they will work in a club providing sexual services. The moment that person gets there and she gets herself in a situation like the wages are not what were promised, her passport is taken, she cannot leave the club without supervision, she is being put up in a house with a lot of other girls and has no freedom, etc., etc., etc. That person could be in a situation of trafficking, because the person that got her to the island is the one that is taking the profits. Because don't forget, that person has to pay for her ticket to be there, right? Then it has to pay for the workroom where she works, for the condoms, for the sheets, for her food, for anything she uses. She makes a debt with the club owner. It's debt bondage, it's human trafficking. So initially, it didn't start out as human trafficking. It started out as a job offer in which somebody knew that she would be providing sexual services. But there is a moment it changes, and then that person is a victim of human trafficking. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Next question. Right, how about right in the center? Oh, wow. It's a scramble. How about the young lady right in the middle of the 3 questions? I really picked the most complicated table in this room. With the glasses. Yes, you there. Sorry.
My name's Deamber Young. I attend Alabama State University, and this is for Mrs. Jeanette. What way would you go about if you do see a person being conducted to human trafficking? How would you go about helping them without risking your own safety?
Sorry. You can see I'm like an impatient person. It has to work right away. So your question was what to do when somebody is coming forward as a victim of human trafficking. Do I get your question right?
What to do to make sure that you're not in danger yourself.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Cool. Well, the most important thing is that it depends on the person and his situation, because not everybody has to be taken out of the situation where they are in. It depends. Like in the example I just gave, if that person is under the control of somebody, we have to take that person out. It means that immediately after we determine that that person is a possible victim of human trafficking, we take them to a shelter. We make sure that that person, her boss, is not able to get in touch with her. And she will be provided with everything we can give her: legal aid, medical aid, food, make sure that she might get another permit to work. But we try to prevent that that person comes in contact with a possible trafficker. The case we have in Aruba now, which is a pretty big case, was something like that. And what we did is, because there was a risk for the victims, there were multiple. We had like 15 at the same time, girls. And we can take them because we're very small, it's not easy. So what we did, because there was a risk of contact, there was a real threat, we used an MOU that we have within the kingdom on human trafficking. And what happened then is that we were able to transport them to another island, to Curaçao. And what happened is that their national coordinator and their system for shelter and assistance and everything took it over until they had to come back to Aruba for the case.
So it depends. We have certain people that can stay by family or friends, or they prefer to go somewhere else. But if you're talking about a risk, it's essential that the victim is always first. You know, we would get questions from Tip also and say like, hey, if it's somebody that did a crime, you know, maybe it's a madam, you know, she was responsible for kind of getting girls in, that's an offense. So she could be held in a police cell and be prosecuted. So we say no, because she was a victim first, that always goes first. So if her status as a victim requires us, or his status as a victim requires us to take that person out of the situation, it's done immediately.
Okay, I think we have time for two more. So, oh boy. Oh, yeah, right there. You got lobbyists. Question for Dan.
Hi, and thank you, Alex. Okay, so I'm with the Student Peace Alliance, and we're committing here to empower 500 peace builders to build jobs that have 360 integrity. So my question for you is, what can they do to make sure whatever job they end up creating, that their supply chains are clean?
Whatever job they end up creating, the supply chain is clean. So a more detailed conversation would ask you what kind of jobs these might be. But it really starts with asking questions and demanding proof from those who sell things to you. It's not that complicated ultimately, and that very easy step is generally missed. So when a university buys paper, when these people buy computers, why not ask the question? Well, put in a little RFP, request for proposals, one of which is, please disclose what you've done to be in accordance with the Executive Order on Human Trafficking and the California Supply Chains and Transparency Act. It's pretty, straightforward. Now, if you get bad information or different information, then we have to have a longer conversation about what you do next. But it should start with something as simple as that.
Can we do that later?
Sure.
Okay, one more. How about... Wow, I think that was me. This young lady in the blue blazer right there. Yes. Why don't you stand up so the mic folks can see who and where you are?
Any of the panelists can really answer this, but my question is, a lot of illegal immigrants are a huge portion of the human trafficking and sex slavery that goes on. I actually met someone that was a part of that, and she said that she never said anything to any authorities, like cops would come to the house because she was scared that she would get deported. So in that case, how do you encourage these women that they will have safety and that they won't end up in the detainee camps with the ICE, or won't end up being more compromised than the situation that they're in?
Well, just so you know, there are laws that will protect women who have been brought to this country that are immigrants. The TVPRA was just reauthorized, and then the TVPRA, women that are brought here from other countries under law should be given treatment and also given safety, places to stay, and are given citizenship for a certain amount of time and can work towards getting a full-on American citizenship if they would like. And visas, sorry.
Visas.
Visas. Thank you.
But that is actually a great point, and one that I hope you guys discuss. Immigration is a huge piece of this, and so how we treat the people that are coming across our borders, whether through their own choices or not. Yes. We're going to break for it's about 10, 12 minutes, so you guys can discuss amongst yourselves, and the incredible panel will be circulating through the room too, so there's no need to come up here. We will come to you, and then we will reconvene to get a report from you guys. Okay. Let me just warm things up here. I'm going to look out into the audience and just, if you guys could designate someone as your speaker of the table and give us a little bit of a report as far as the two findings to the two questions that are posted on the monitors. Let's begin with this table over there in the back. If we can get the seated table of beautiful women right here. Yes. And let us know sort of, what you guys discussed, and if you have any sort of follow-up question for our panel.
So I don't really know how much we really addressed the questions. We kind of just went into discussion about addressing...
Can you just speak into the mic a little bit more?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we didn't really, I don't know how well we really addressed the questions. We just kind of started talking about the whole prevention and awareness aspect. And on the community level, how important it is to collaborate with organizations and agencies and other like school systems and people that we may not see as likely allies, and going back to the plenary session and really targeting those unlikely allies in addressing prevention and awareness. And then on the program level, we really talked about kind of utilizing prevention and awareness tactics simultaneously. And then one of the issues that we really struggled with was how do we go about targeting victims of trafficking without offending, specifically with programs going up to victims, and if their parents are involved, how do we illustrate to them that their child are at risk of trafficking without offending them, and then internationally, how do we go about bringing awareness to communities without insulting them and imposing our own westernized values onto that culture in addressing trafficking? So that's kind of what we discussed in our group.
That is a good question. I mean, how do you tell someone who may be a victim, hey, I think you're a victim, without offending them or their family? I mean, because in a lot of these cases, victims are still living with their families, or their families are somehow still in the picture. And Jade, I don't know if you want to take a stab at that.
Well, I think, because you're right, it's a very sensitive thing, but I think that going and educating people in high-risk communities, and even that's tricky, because the idea that trafficking only happens in high-risk communities, it happens a lot, but it's not the only place. And I think that it's really just about education. It's getting as knowledgeable about this issue as you can, and going out and educating young people and people in general. I would say, you know, there are shelters, runaway shelters, especially runaway children and children in the foster care system in this country tend to be victims, and a high number of victims that are runaways and foster care children. So if you could create a way in which you could go out, and instead of specifically targeting someone and saying, we think you, to just go out and start educating and just say, we want to educate you and get you up to speed on something that we're seeing happening in the community. And then, you know, you just educate people, and hopefully they can identify for themselves what is happening. But I would definitely start there.
Dan, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that the indicator of the problem is the same in many cases, whether you're talking about labor trafficking in a supply chain, or domestic worker, or a sex worker, which is that person is isolated. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out to someone who's... Oops. She's fine. I was saying there's nothing wrong with reaching out to someone who's isolated, right? In any case, you don't have to be aggressive about it and say, gosh, I'm reaching out to you because I think you're in trouble. It's just giving them a way, as Jada said, to find a pathway out.
All right, let's hear from one more table before we have to go. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Katie, and I run a charity for child prostitutes in West Africa and Liberia. And I just wanted to thank Jada in front of everybody that she just helped us win $1 million. So we're able to put 1,000 girls in school for the first time. So thank you, Jada. You and Willow are invited to come meet the girls anytime. So our table, we were discussing, the panel discussion, and I shared a poem about one of our girls, and they're all like, you have to do the poem. So I'm going to do the poem. It's called She Is My Promise, and it's about one of our girls. I am back on this bathroom floor again, and it's the middle of the night again, and flashes of your face keep me up again. It's you, Abigail. You have stained my soul. Is it a street worker? Is it a sex worker? You tell me, what is the politically correct way to say that my 11-year-old friend Abigail is a war-orphaned prostitute? Yes, this $2 hooker, this child, She opens her legs to men so that she could be alive. And right now, I'm not sure if she's alive. And when I think about her, I don't have the words to describe. My friend Abigail is missing. She is gone. She is nowhere to be found. And when I call her name, nobody knows her. Her community tells me matter-of-factly that she's vanished. Her country shushes me. It's not good for their reputation. My country tells me it's not polite to talk about her. Here she is the blame of a corrupt government in a country that people know nothing about. Here she is just another abstract thought that would never cross someone's mind on a line to purchase a cup of coffee that costs more than she would make selling herself for one day. Here she is just another Facebook cause that people might check they like because it's trendy or because it's easy. She is the bottom of the earth to a world that has been brutal to her, that has beat her up and raped her in ways that people who could read would never be able to pronounce. Now this small child is gone, and I promised her that I would come and find her, and I can't. So I am up again, on this bathroom floor again, in the middle of the night again, and I need to scream her name. Abigail! Where are you? I'm trying to find you. I haven't forgotten you. I am struggling to find words to talk about you. People here are offended by you, disturbed by you. I am too. You keep me up at night. And I hope that you always do. You are my vow, my promise. I'm coming to get you. Thank you, everyone. Yes. We have a fellowship available. If you're interested, if you're interested in working with us, we are bringing on 8 fellows. Let us know. We have cards over here.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think we're going to end on that very powerful note. I just want to thank our panel today, Jada Pinkett-Smith, Dan Viederman, Jeanette Richardson-Baars. It's great to have you guys all, and thanks for being engaged on the issue, everyone.